So without mentioning any of the big obvious choices, boys, what are some games we can recommend to our Switch listeners out there that don't garner the spotlight like our first party games? And over the last couple of weeks we've done strategy games and all those other ones. This week we're looking at overlooked action-adventure or RPG games on the Switch. Does anybody want to get us started, or shall I?
Go for it.
I suppose I don't know if this is overlooked because we talk about it enough. It's Bastion. It's isometric, top-down action platformer, and it's got RPG mechanics in there. So there's action, adventure, and RPG all thrown into one title. So it kind of covers everything we want to talk about here. But the difference with this in other games is that it's the narrator. It plays very similar to, as you would imagine, an isometric twin-stick shooter would. But with more, you can basically upgrade your different kind of weapon classes. Yes, you can get some long-range weapons like bows and all that, but there's a lot more emphasis on melee attacks and fighting with swords and clubs and maces and upgrading them as you go through the game with things you can pick up, collectibles during the game. You can go back to levels that you've been to already before to get extra experience from. And there's a lot of boss fights. There's a very good feel in the way the combat works and the way you can dodge roll out of enemies' paths. There's lots of kill rooms, which, while I'm not particularly fond of kill rooms, you walk along a certain area, you get to a kill room, the door comes down behind you, and then you've got 16 enemies that you'd have to dispatch. There's loads of these little challenge rooms as well, which you get online leaderboards to crack on with. A hell of a lot of content in there. Maybe it overstays its welcome a little bit too long, but what I mentioned in the beginning then is the narrator, and it's this heavily deep-voiced guy who's telling the story, and he's telling the story as the world is building around you. It's not procedurally generated, but it makes it feel as if it is, because the land is dropping in pieces as if it's been built by tiles. But the narration in it is witty, poignant, and quite lovely.
Mm-hmm. No, I've almost finished Bastion, but I didn't quite get to the end, so I should go back and finish it. But I agree completely. Like, it was a big surprise for me when I first played it. I thought the art style looked decent, but once I actually started playing the game and got used to the combat and everything, it's a very, very... It's an old game, to be fair. It's an old... I think it's like 10 years old now, maybe slightly less, but
maybe more.
I can't remember, but
anyway,
it's I'm really glad I picked it up on the Switch, and I think I've played 3 or 4 hours and definitely really enjoyed what I've played. I need to go back and finish it, but it's always cheap as well, and it's very regularly on sale, so a good recommendation, I would say, for a good action adventure game for sure.
Greg, anything in particular for you?
Not really, actually. Musha, maybe.
Classic.
That's it. Like, it's a game I always enjoyed back at the time, and it's a decent enough port on the Switch. I would say give that a go. It kind of plays in that like camera wise and stuff. It's like those old style Resident Evil games where obviously the camera's fixed. So you can use like sort of like tank controls kind of that's like synonymous with those old games, or I think you can use like a modern control scheme where obviously like if you press down your character will move down the screen, whatever. So it's kind of got you covered that way, but it's just a decent wee game. It's not particularly long. I think it's maybe only about 10 hours at most. It's decent. The only downside that I have with it is there are slide puzzles in it, which are one of my pet peeves, but they're easy and it's not something you would spend ages doing, because the slide puzzles, it gives you a number of turns in which you can complete it, so it's maybe only like 5 turns or something, so you know that the answer is going to be relatively simple.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to faff around too much with those.
Nothing like Professor Layton's slide puzzles.
No, definitely not.
Onimusha's always on sale for $7.99. I've been on the button, gonna buy it, and then I thought, oh, this is like Samurai Resident Evil, and I've never quite gone for it. Maybe I should. Nick, how about you?
Dead Cells is my favourite. One of my favourite action-adventure games on the Switch.
That is on sale at the moment.
It is.
And if you get the Bad Seed bundle as well, it's only £1 extra in the sales, like about £14 and something and change. £1 above the asking price of the original package. Anyway.
This is actually a game that I bought on a whim, because I think it was when it came out. I bought it just after it launched a couple of years ago, just because Brian Altano from IGN was praising it quite heavily. I just remember seeing, I think it was on Instagram, I saw on his Instagram page, he did sort of a mini review and praised it very, very heavily. So I just thought, Brian's usually right about stuff like this. So I just got it. And yeah, 15, 20 hours I think I've played it. I haven't finished it. It's very much in the same vein as Enter the Gungeon. That it is like a sort of semi-procedurally generated game where the level design changes every time, but the structure of the level, it uses the same sort of bits of the level and just puts them together in a random way. So the level order is always the same. And it's just like the combat is really, really good. There's a variety of different weapons. It's a side-scrolling adventure game. I don't really know what I would say it's similar to from the 16-bit era, but it's like a kind of like a hack and slash. There are lots of enemies, and then you have like swords, you can have bows, you can have sort of fire attacks, grenades and stuff. Everything also, like the weapons that you can throw have a cooldown, and everything can be upgraded. You can get perks and stuff for your weapons as well to make you more powerful. And yeah, basically you just have to traverse through this castle, escape from jail. There's a few bosses, some of them are extremely tough. I think I've done the first 2 bosses on one run, but not that much more. The controls are very tight. The combat feels good, feels fluid. The music's really good as well. The art style, the visual design, it's like inspired by 16-bit, but obviously it's not 16-bit. Like, it looks a lot better than a 16-bit game, but the sort of you can see the inspiration that's come from the 16-bit era. And yeah, just like every enemy you kill, or most of the enemies that you kill, drop a cell, and you use those cells to upgrade your permanent weapons, your permanent skills and stuff like that. So very much in the same vein as Enter the Gungeon. It's just trial and error. Keep going, see how far you can get, unlock as many new things as possible for your next run. I know Greg's not a massive fan of this type of game. I know quite a few people actually are not a big fan of this type of game, but it's something that I have never played before the Switch, and Dead Cells and Enter the Gungeon have really, I think they've both done this type of game in a really good way. I've never played any of the classics. I've never played The Binding of Isaac, for example, which is like the original, I think, that people like to talk about. But these 2 games, I feel they offer something that I've not really seen before. Obviously, Enter the Gungeon is top-down. Dead Cells is side-scrolling. I think they both execute the same idea very well. I think I put like 60 hours into Enter the Gungeon. I have finished it a couple of times as well, and it's one of those games that you can pick up for 30 minutes and play and possibly finish, and then just drop it and come back to it later. I think Dead Cells is the same. I would like to finish it one day, but I think that's going to be a little while away. But yeah, great action-adventure game. Give it a go. Give it a go if you've never played it.
We're gonna try and sell more action adventure games to Greg here. My next one is a game I wanted to talk about a long time ago, actually, in the recent games, and never got around to it. Is The Final Station. Picked this up on a whim. It's a 2D slight platforming, but you tend to be on the same plane all the time. But there's a slight element there as well of a twin stick shooter along your 2D, and it's in a post-apocalyptic world where it looks like there's this entity, this black goo has gone into people, and they come back in kind of zombified state, and you have to work. They say it's procedurally generated, but I can't see how it is, because everything everything, when you pull into a station, you start off on a train, for example, and you move into a station, and then it'll go, right, you can't move the train to your next destination until you get the unlock code. So basically, you have to work your way through the level, and it tends to be a circuitous route where your code is always at the end of the route, and then you just jump down off a platform, back onto the train, and off you go again. But the mechanics and the variety of enemies as you progress throughout this game, and the story it tells as well, is intriguing enough. I think it's a really, really solid 2D platform, kind of a half shooter. And there's elements of RPG in there where you're balancing, do I shoot this guy or do I pull them towards me to explode a barrel so it'll attract more enemies? I can explode another barrel and kill them in 4 guys at the end in one go. And the Switch version as well adds in this DLC. There's also this kind of management thing on the train as well, where you're trying to keep survivors alive. The survivors are following you along on the train, and as you go into new places, you're grabbing a survivor and taking them with you. You can choose which survivors you want, and some survivors will give you buffs then for your weapons or give you more aim accuracy. Some survivor may go, hey, you take me along and I will give you like a red dot pointer for your gun so you can see where you shoot in, to make you more accurate and things like that. And then you've also got to balance your food rations with these survivors, whether you want to share them. Survivors can die on the train as well, and you're kind of rewarded for saving people or just being I was going to say a bad word then, just being a nasty person and letting them perish after they've given you the goods. The DLC added then is this taken from another perspective of this story, because as I'm not going to say anything about the story is quite intriguing as you work through it, in a car. So there's a single survivor next to you in the car, and you're pretty much doing the same game, but with new enemies, new weapons, new environments. I thought this was very underrated, the final station, and if it comes on sale again, and I think I only paid about £4 for it in a sale, well worth the £4.
Okay, good stuff.
Any more?
Yeah, I've got loads, to be honest. It's like
action
adventure is one of my favourite genres, especially indie games and especially on the Switch. I'll mention a couple that I've bought but I haven't played, but I've heard are very good. So we mentioned
I'll add a couple
Crosscode
to the list when you finish, but Crosscode, yeah,
we talked about already. I'm keen to play that. I do have it on PC, but not started it yet. Hyperlight Drifter, which I mentioned before as well. I've played it for a little while. It seems to control very well, and it seems to have good combat. People say it's inspired by Link to the Past, which I mentioned earlier, but in the first hour that I played it, I couldn't see that, but I'm sure, as it goes on, that might be more true. But I enjoyed what I played so far. I just never got back into it. What else did I want to say? I played Bloodstained, the original one, the first one, very heavily inspired by Castlevania.
Yeah. Curse of the Moon.
Yeah. So I started playing that this week and couldn't really get past the second level. So I'm gonna have to keep trying. It's a very difficult game. It's very retro and its design choices, but that's basically anything by Inti Creates is a good action adventure game. They've got plenty of them on the Switch. What else did I want to say? I'm just having a look now, and I can't remember what else I wanted to talk about. Shakedown Hawaii, again, another game, which I've not really played.
That's a game I want to pick up.
I've not really played it as much as I could have. I think I've put 2 or 3 hours into that. It's definitely a step up from Retro City Rampage. Very heavily inspired by the classic GTA games on the PlayStation 1. Interesting story, funny story, a lot of variety in the things that you can do. Graphical style is pretty nice, 16-bit. And the last one, I guess, that I wanted to talk about, if I can remember, because I can't find my list now. Crypt of the Necrodancer. So the prequel to Cadence of Hyrule. And I think it's better, actually, than Cadence of Hyrule, to be honest. Because I like Cadence of Hyrule. I'm not too sure if I like the structure of the game, how everything has an open world. I definitely preferred the sort of set levels of Crypt of the Necrodancer. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, but it's kind of a hybrid rhythm game. And it's got the best soundtrack. The soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal. Very, very, very difficult game. It takes a long time to get used to it, but it's one of those games that when you begin to get it right, when you begin to master it, it feels so good when you go through a whole level without taking a hit and just, quickly getting through all the enemies. Again, it's kind of like in the same sort of vein as Enter the Gungeon and Dead Cells, that you have like a hub area, and every time you play through a level, you get permanent unlocks, and you can unlock new weapons that you can find every time you do a run. There's only 4 worlds in that game. I think I've played it about 7 or 8 hours on PC, and I've only managed to get to the end of the second world, so that's how difficult it is, basically. I always get confused when I meet new enemies, or I misinterpret enemy patterns and end up taking hits. Definitely a game that's much easier if you have a weapon that can hit across 2 squares instead of
at
one.
long range. Yeah.
So I always go for spears or something like that if possible. But yeah, it's always dirt cheap. I actually got it on the Switch again. I had it on PC and I bought it on the Switch because it was like $2.99 or $3.99 or something like that. So I just got it on the Switch to have it on the Switch. But actually, there's definitely some input lag on the Switch, and it doesn't feel quite as tight as it does on the PC. So be warned for that. But that could just be my TV, to be honest. It might not necessarily be the issue with the Switch. But yeah, great game. Check it out on YouTube. Watch a couple of videos. Well worth picking up if it's ever on sale.
A couple of games that anything interesting you so far, Greg?
To be honest, like Nick in particular, they're going over quite a few games I have heard of and have seen in the past, and there's nothing there really that I actually am excited to play. So I don't really think you've sold me on anything just yet. Okay, maybe Lee has something up his sleeve.
The first one I bought, haven't played yet, and I'm looking forward to it. It's another roguelite one. It's Moonlighter. It's got that isometric, but with more melee and sword play. So it looks and plays a bit like Zelda, but an old 2D top-down Zelda. But then it's got this roguelite element to it, where you go into a dungeon at night, kill whatever, work your way through, just like Enter the Gungeon, come back out, and then using the body parts, whatever treasure you can accumulate in those dungeons, you then sell them in your shop the next day and upgrade through that way. And I'm really, really looking forward to this. There's been some DLC packs and all that you can add to it, but I just bought the base pack, which I'm looking forward to. And one that's on sale this week, I haven't got it, but I'm thinking about it, $11.99, is Children of Mortar. This is another isometric top-down twin-stick shooter in a kind of action RPG element, where there are 7 children in a family, and each one tells an individual story, and you can work through the entire game going through each of those children's stories, through the overarching story. Game I did want to talk about, which I have played, and played extensively to the point of finishing it a few times, is Death Road to Canada. Visually, when you look at it, because I reviewed this, and when I got it first of all, I thought, oh, what is this? This is a bit of a mess. It looks cheap. There's 2 parts to the game, basically. There's the management side of it, which takes part as you travel across the landscape in either a car or on foot. So you can grab a car, grab some gas, and once you're in a car, you can get across America as you're traveling to Canada over a set number of days. So if you're on foot, it's going to take you longer. So there's this management of keeping your party members happy, and your party members can be up to 3 other party members, including yourself. There's 4, and each one eats food. So do you want it to have 2 party members or 4 party members, and they'll eat more food because you've got to scavenge food. And you've got to keep everybody happy as well by making correct decisions in dialogue multiple choice boxes. Now, when I saw this first, I thought, what's this? This is really, really weird. But it adds something to the game which other games haven't, that in this kind of ilk haven't had. And once you play through it a couple of times and you're going to die, which you will do, and you come back to it, it really does add something to the game. And then you go into the other second half of the game, which is the action part, which is walking around zombie-infested landscapes and scavenging for goods. It might be finding survivors. It might be surviving a horde for a certain amount of time. And the horde is huge. You're basically this tiny survivor. You've got a certain weapon, and as you use the weapon, you start getting tired. So it's got cooldown effects on there as well, which you have to take into consideration. So you don't want to go all hell bent with a baseball bat. You got to make space, basically. Finding space, hitting a zombie, finding space. And if there's two of you playing local, which this game allows as well, it adds to the fun. Keeping both people alive. I can't say enough good things about it. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself with this.
To be honest, I haven't really enjoyed this game.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Different take. Carry on.
I mean, I do appreciate what it's trying to do, and I have enjoyed aspects of it. But I think what you said at the end there about local play probably makes it a lot easier, because I find it, personally for me, I think the pickups are too sparse. There's not enough ammo. And when you do have to use melee weapons, the characters all get tired too quickly and you just end up getting swamped. Like, I've put about 5 or 6 hours into this game. I haven't even got close to finishing it because I always end up running out of petrol, or I end up running out of ammo, and I just, I can never get further than sort of day 9 or 10, really.
There's this upgrade element, though, where you collect Zombo points, they call them. And then as you get more of those, you're more likely, just in like an Enter the Gungeon, you're more likely to get certain characters, which will have better stamina. You're more likely to get better drops and everything in the game as well. So you do have to put a fair bit of time into it, but over playing it for 10 hours, you'll get to a point where you're more likely to complete the game.
Yeah, I do like what it does, though. I do like the sort of the mashup style where you've got the sort of even kind of paper-based RPG, isn't it? Where where you're choosing dialogue options and choosing what to do. That I usually choose wrong on that one and end up lowering my stats, but whatever. But I find that aspect of the game interesting, but I find the exploration and the combat to be not quite up to scratch for me personally.
Cool.
But yeah, it is worth checking out, and it's never expensive. It's always on sale. It's fairly cheap, so it's definitely something unique, that one. I do enjoy it to some extent.
Yeah, just don't be put off by the visuals, because I was at first. Yeah. I got one more.
Go on.
Do you have any more?
No, I'm done.
Okay, last one. The Swindle.
Not heard of it.
Reviewed this for Nintendo Review way back in the day. It's a 2D platforming, but with roguelite elements that keeps you coming back for more. And you are trying to steal a device from the police. This is your end goal, which will catch all thieves. So you're a thief. You're trying to steal the thief catching device, so you can carry on about your business. It's slightly cyberpunk, and there's lots of elements of stealth, going into buildings, making sure you're not seen by the cameras, working your way through a building and shutting the cameras down, for example, in a little mini game. So even when you go on a computer to shut things down, if you get the mini game wrong and your timing based wrong, it'll alert the police, and then you've got a certain amount of time to get out and back to your hub. The game is pretty straightforward. It's got this very unique visual style. It's got a wonderful soundtrack as well. This ticking clock all the time. It's got this, the soundtrack is always reminding you that, come on, you got to be getting on, because you've only got so many days. I think it's 99 days before this device to catch thieves becomes operational. And as you play it through the first run, there's no way you'll be able to finish the game. But once again, you go back to the hub and you can upgrade your elements of weapons and items that you use in game to get through the game. stealth devices, different traps, different your abilities so you can hack into a computer much easier, your ability to take down robots which are linked to the police. And it's another one like Death Row to Canada. It probably lives or dies by its visual representation, first of all, and I think it's another one that needs to be looked at through what it looks like and played, because it plays really well.
I'll have to have a look on
The
the Swindle. To be honest, you kind of sold me a little bit on Moonlighter. I need to play that game, I think. I've heard about it before, but yeah, it sounds pretty interesting. And if it is in that sort of similar to Enter the Gungeon style, then I'd probably enjoy that.
It is, yeah. Moonlighter is the one I'm looking forward to the most. Out of all those games I've mentioned, Moonlighter.
You've already got it, right? Yeah.
Yes, I do, yeah. And I will try it. Messenger is begging to be finished. And then this Paper Mario and Moonlighter will be next on my list, possibly.
Good stuff.
Greg, any of those that I mentioned, push you to a buy.
I appreciate the efforts from both of us, but kind of is becoming more and more common. Nothing there excites me, and I don't think you've sold me on any of those games at all. But hopefully you've sold some of the listeners on some of them.
Different strokes for different
That's
folks.
what we're here for. Yeah. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give us a like if you've enjoyed our content. You can also check out our other great content on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the N-E Café podcast from all good podcast providers. Just follow the links in the description below.